"Excuse me, ma'am, are you really married?" The question caught Rachel off guard. "What do you mean?" she replied, puzzled. "I had hired a private investigator for a certain investigation," the person continued, their voice solemn. "From the report of that investigator, I heard an unexpected fact that left me unable to hide my shock. If my husband has been exploiting my frequent night shifts to have a sweet affair, I will never forgive him." Rachel, a nurse at a general hospital and a newlywed celebrating her first Christmas since marriage, reflected on her relationship with Daniel. They had met at a social gathering, bonded over their shared last name, and married after 4 years of dating. Daniel, 5 years her senior and a gentleman, worked as an area manager at a retail store, often traveling for business. With no children yet, Rachel took night shifts to earn extra income, enjoying more days off as a result. Their marriage, although relatively new, had been filled with trips and dates until Daniel's unexpected presence at home after one of Rachel's night shifts raised questions. "I'm home, huh? Daniel, you're not off today, are you?" Rachel asked as she walked through the door. Daniel, visibly uneasy, hesitated before responding. "Well, you see, I have a sudden business trip starting tomorrow. They gave me the day off today." Rachel felt a pang of disappointment at the news of Daniel's upcoming week-long trip. She had been looking forward to their rare consecutive holiday, hoping for a slow evening together. "If it's for work," she sighed, trying to mask her disappointment. With no other option, I shifted gears and decided to drive Daniel to the airport. The drive took about 2 hours, and his flight to the head office in New York was another 2 hours. After bidding Daniel farewell at the airport, a place I rarely visited, I took a leisurely stroll and had lunch at a nearby famous cafe before returning home. Exhausted, I collapsed on the sofa and noticed an unfamiliar envelope under the TV stand. It must have been something Daniel, who was supposed to be on a business trip, had left behind. Feeling a twinge of guilt, I opened the envelope and found an album filled with pictures of Daniel, an unknown woman, and a little girl, possibly around 5 years old, in front of a kindergarten classroom dressed in a school uniform. What on earth is this? My mind raced. Could Daniel be having an affair? And with a single mother? Unforgivable infidelity. The word echoed in my mind, prompting me to dial Daniel's office. I feigned casual conversation, subtly asking about his supposed trip. To my shock, they informed me that Daniel was on bereavement leave. Moreover, there were rarely any business trips from their branch to the head office. Confusion set in. Daniel had claimed he was away on business, but he was actually on bereavement leave. I hadn't heard anything about it. He had been lying to get time off work just to meet with the woman and child in those photos. That was the only conclusion I could draw. Determined, I began searching for a detective agency. After settling on one, I planned to visit the next day. Yet throughout it all, I couldn't shake the realization that Daniel had been deceiving me for the entire 4 years we'd been together, fabricating these supposed business trips. A profound emptiness washed over me. Perhaps from exhaustion, I eventually drifted off to sleep. When I woke, it was already 6 a.m. the next day. With an appointment set for 10 a.m. at the detective agency, I carefully packed the envelope I found into a larger bag to ensure it wouldn't crease. As the appointed time approached, I walked through the gates of the detective agency for the first time in my life. The words I had rehearsed flew out of my head the moment I opened the office door. Inside, I found a young detective, barely in his mid-20s, dressed casually like a college student. Seeing my surprise, he greeted me with a casual smile. "You think I'm an immature-looking detective, don't you?" he said, lightening the mood. "Oh no, I'm sorry," I replied quickly. This is my first time in a place like this. I'm a bit nervous." He chuckled softly and gestured for me to sit on the sofa, ready to hear my story after a brief exchange. I placed the album, which had ignited my suspicions of Daniel's infidelity, on the table. True to his profession, the detective swiftly began gathering necessary evidence, making coffee with practiced ease. He carefully examined a copy of the photograph showing Daniel, the woman, and the little girl in front of the school. "This is likely a significant clue," he remarked, pointing out the clearly visible name of the school. Without delay, he searched for the preschool online and placed a call from another room. I couldn't see how he obtained the information, but soon he returned with news. The little girl in the photo was indeed enrolled at that preschool, currently on a leave of absence. Located in New York, the investigation would be costly, but I was determined. Despite being a nurse, I had been investing in stocks and forex since adulthood, achieving reasonable returns. Now, I resolved to use these funds for the investigation. The detective estimated the trip's duration uncertain, depending on how quickly we could gather evidence. Yet beyond financial concerns, what drove me was the deep humiliation of being deceived by my husband. I was determined to gather proof at any cost. The detective speculated that once Daniel returned home, the little girl might also resume attending preschool. The next day, I went to work as usual, hiding my turmoil beneath a facade of normalcy. I carefully replaced the envelope and its contents exactly where I had found them. Soon after, I received a message from Daniel, who was supposed to be away for a week, informing me, "Sorry, my business trip is extended by 3 more days. I'll be back on Sunday." Following our plan, I contacted the detective on the day Daniel was scheduled to return home. The detective, eager to begin, flew to New York the next day to initiate the investigation. That evening, I received a surprising call from him, revealing an unexpected development. "During the preliminary investigation, we've uncovered something unexpected," the detective started. "What do you mean?" I asked, bewildered. "I'll be back tomorrow. Can we meet soon?" I responded, urgency in my voice. I visited the detective's office promptly after finishing my night shift the next day, consumed by thoughts of Daniel's possible infidelity. Was he cheating after all? I asked the detective as soon as I arrived. The detective hesitated before responding, his expression grave. "No, I think the situation might be even more serious." His words made me swallow hard. "What do you mean?" "Firstly, it appears true that your husband took bereavement leave from his company. But Mrs., are you sure you're really married to Daniel?" he asked, his tone cautious. "What are you implying?" "We officially registered our marriage 6 months ago," I protested. "In fact," the detective continued, "I followed Daniel and your daughter back from her kindergarten in New York and found their home. According to locals, Daniel has been living alone there for the past 4 years, only returning to New York a few times a year." The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt, leaving me speechless and struggling to comprehend what I had just heard. "I heard he stayed for about a week for his father-in-law's funeral in New York." "No way," I stammered, unable to find words. "Since you and Daniel originally had the same last name, it's hard to say anything definitive at this stage. But I would suggest checking at the city hall," the detective advised after I expressed my gratitude. Following his advice, I went straight to City Hall. There, I requested a copy of the residency certificate for my entire household. What I saw in the document stunned me. Only my name was listed. "No way, there must be some mistake," I exclaimed, feeling a surge of confusion. I appealed to the female City Hall staff member assisting me. She looked distressed as she replied, "Even if you say so, we couldn't find any record of your marriage." Desperate and near tears, I pleaded, "Please check again. My husband's name is Daniel." Despite my pleas, the staff member apologized repeatedly, her remorse genuine. Amidst my overwhelming confusion, I recalled the day we registered our marriage. It was a work day for me, but Daniel insisted it had to be done on that particular auspicious day. I had gone alone to the city hall to submit our marriage registration. Never did I imagine it hadn't been processed. Allowing tears to flow freely, my emotions gradually settled. I apologized and bowed my head before leaving City Hall. On my way home from my night shift, all I could think about was how exhausting everything had become. Drained, I fell asleep on the sofa, contemplating my next steps. When I woke up, Daniel was in the midst of preparing dinner. Seeing him like that reminded me of the woman and the girl in the photo. I was furious about being deceived, but I knew losing my composure now would hinder any action I could take. So I managed to suppress my emotions. From that day on, I put on a smile in front of Daniel. About a week after my visit to City Hall, I began considering how I could learn more about his real life and his wife. Daniel, often forgetful, had left his smartphone at home that day. Since I happened to be off, I thought about delivering it to him but decided to check his phone first. Normally, snooping on someone else's phone isn't appropriate, but given my mental state, I felt I had no other choice. Daniel sometimes voiced his passcode aloud while unlocking his phone, so it was easy to access. Among his contacts, I found a woman labeled with a girl's picture, the same one he always talked about as an icon. Without hesitation, I called her. After 3 rings, a calm and elegant voice answered, Hello, who is this? Are you Mrs. Daniel Smith? I asked directly. The woman sounded puzzled but replied, Yes, I am. But who are you? I'm someone Daniel met during his work travels, I explained carefully. It's hard for me to say this, but we are living together now. So there really is a woman he's been visiting. I see, she responded calmly. I was planning to visit my husband who lives there during the end-of-year holidays. Can we talk then? I hadn't expected this turn of events but gladly accepted her generous offer. Around the same time, Daniel mentioned, Sorry, but there's a reunion in my hometown this New Year's, so I'm going back home. I had been eagerly waiting for these words from Daniel. When he finally proposed the meeting, I immediately agreed. According to what his wife told me, Daniel's hometown was in the next town over. I had believed both his parents were deceased and that he had no relatives, but it turned out they were alive and well, residing nearby. With only a month left until the end of the year, I sought out a lawyer specializing in relationships, determined to thoroughly confront and punish Daniel. Until the day of our showdown, I continued to act normally around Daniel, though emotionally it was unbearable. Finally, 1 month later, the day arrived. I told Daniel I had a night shift starting on the 30th and left the house with a smile, wishing him a happy new year. I managed to arrange for vacation days from December 30th to January 2nd under the guise of work obligations. On the 30th, I stayed at a business hotel, and on the morning of the 31st, I met with Daniel's wife at our designated meeting place. There I saw an elegant woman, just as she appeared in the photos, Mary. She had married Daniel 6 years ago, and they had a 5-year-old daughter. After a brief introduction, Mary and I began to execute our plan. Mary had flown in from New York with her parents and daughter. After leaving her daughter with her mother and father in their hotel room, we headed to Daniel's family home. Mary had already spoken to Daniel's parents beforehand, so I was surprised when they greeted me with deep bows upon seeing me. As planned, on the evening of the 31st, Daniel opened the door to his parents' living room. I'm home, he announced. Welcome back. The woman who greeted him with a smile was not his mother, nor was it Mary. It was me. Daniel paled. Why are you here? He stammered. I faced Daniel calmly with a smile. What's this? Weren't you married to me? Daniel was stunned into silence. Before he could respond, Mary spoke up quietly. What's the meaning of this, Daniel? We just had a baby and needed help from our parents. I asked you to work away from home, but behind our backs, you've been leading a double life and having an affair. Mary's words hung in the air, delivered with such certainty that for a moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. I'm just glad we're on the same side now. I began, directing my anger at Daniel. Every time you said you were going on a business trip, you were actually meeting with your family. You were married. Why did you approach me? Did you think you could deceive me? This is marriage fraud, you scum. When I asked your company about your business trips, they said you hardly ever go on them. What were you thinking? You have such a beautiful wife and an adorable daughter at home. I was such a fool to believe your lies. Confronted by both of us, Daniel's smirk suddenly broke into laughter. I wonder how I was found out, he mocked. Living a double life was fun, especially with Rachel working nights. It was easy to deceive you because we have the same last name, and you were mostly working nights. Upon hearing these callous words, Daniel's mother, who couldn't believe her son's deceit, gave him a punch in the face. I looked at Daniel sternly and continued, Besides me, you had 3 other lovers, didn't you? I thrust the incriminating photos at him. Startled, Daniel sputtered, What is this? Are you stalking me? I'll sue you. These are all pieces of evidence gathered by a private investigator I hired because I suspected you were having an affair. I retorted firmly. We're going to make you pay damages to both Mary and me. As I spoke with resolve, Daniel collapsed to the floor, begging for mercy. I'm sorry. Just spare me the damages. I'll continue my relationship with both of you. Just spare me the damages. I was speechless with disbelief. It seemed he was broke from spending too much on his other lovers. I didn't care anymore. Leaving Daniel's childhood home, I told him, I don't even want to speak to you anymore. Let's handle the rest through our lawyers. Afterwards, I worked with my lawyer to file a claim for compensation on grounds of bigamy. I was grateful when the money was successfully recovered. Feeling guilty towards Mary, I offered her some of the compensation, but she refused. In fact, she thanked me for the evidence I provided, and we became friends. According to Mary, she collected compensation from Daniel's other girlfriend and ended her relationship with him. She made sure to secure her fair share of alimony and child support. It turned out one of his mistresses was a colleague, and Daniel was demoted at work, sent to a subsidiary company. At the new company, he was reportedly bossed around by a younger employee and cried every day. He couldn't quit his job because he needed the money to pay off the compensation. Meanwhile, I moved out of the house I had shared with Daniel, renting a place that suited me perfectly for living alone. I embraced a carefree life, visiting New York a few times a year and maintaining a friendship with Mary and her daughter.